Good evening, all. I'm really honored in welcoming our first speaker for this evening. I've got a paper here. Sorry, I couldn't. He's got so many credentials, I just couldn't remember everything.
We don't have time.
Don't worry, I'll make it very short. Okay. Now, we have an IITian who received both his BTech and PhD from IIT Madras, and who also is a professor at IIT Madras, who's engaged in teaching, research, and consultancy in structural engineering, with a focus on the design of concrete structure. His technical publications include books titled Reinforced Concrete Design, Structural Analysis, Advanced Structural Analysis, and Handbook on Seismic Retrofit of Buildings. He is presently chairman of the Bureau of Indian Standards, CED 38, Committee on Special Structures. He's given several talks and seminars on finding meaning and fulfillment in life through awareness and transcendence of one's ego self. His writings on this theme includes a book titled Stop Sleepwalking Through Life. He founded the Reflections movement in IIT Madras, which continues to inspire students and helps them find a new meaning in life. And he's a professor married to a teacher who teaches at Shishya, history at school. So please join me in welcoming Professor Devdas Menon. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Namaskar. If you don't mind, I'll just sit.
Yeah, you can sit.
Because we'll be on the same level footing. I see that all of you are sitting, and I'm sure the viewers are also sitting. The topic given, or rather chosen by me, is needs a bit of an introduction. So probably 5 to 10 minutes will go in that. 40 minutes is really far too short a time for a topic of this nature, but I'll try to do my best. If you have questions online, you have to raise those questions and I'll try to answer them if I can. So let me begin by kind of saying why I chose this topic. I believe this is a community which calls itself the knowledge community. So I'll begin with that. What is missing in our knowledge? I would like to actually begin with a quotation because we're all Indians and it's nice to have a third person perspective. So I'm going to quote someone called Andrew Cohen, who is a spiritual teacher in the US, who'd spent many years in India. And he recently gave an interview after visiting India about his assessment of the knowledge community in India. So it's about you and me. This is what he has to say, and it's especially meant for young people, and I see many of you are young. In the amazing economic and technological upsurge of modern India, where there is so much promise, millions of young people all seem to be getting on the same train. They appear to be moving in lockstep, striving to get good jobs so that they can get married, have children, and be able to send their children to good schools like IIT, so that they can get a good education, so that they can get good jobs, and get married, and have children, and so on. Is it true?
Yes.
Yeah, very true. There's a lot of drive and ambition, but not a lot of deeper introspection or consideration of the fundamental philosophical and metaphysical questions about who we really are and why we are here. Everybody here seems to be blindly conforming to their culture's expectations without any sense that there could be another way. Ironically, the perennial wisdom of India's great mystical traditions, which attracted so many like myself to come to the motherland to find ourselves, does not seem to speak to most of these young people. Their eyes, I should say your eyes, are on the material world, though we claim to be the knowledge community, and the promise of a better life, and if they are lucky, in the West. A pretty down-to-earth, accurate assessment without being very critical of our community. So I'll take off on that last line, if you are lucky in the West, because many of you have traveled to the West. And I'm going to go 30 years back, and I'm going to give another quotation ascribed to a comedian called George Carlin, but it's available on the internet. It's called The Paradox of Our Times. This is 30 years ago in the West, and I want you to relate it to what's happening today in India. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers, wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but we have less. We buy more, but we enjoy less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less sense. More knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, yet more problems. More medicine, but less wellness. Carefully chosen words. We have multiplied our possessions, but reduced our values. We talk too much, drive too fast, stay up too late, get up too tired, watch TV too much, love and pray too seldom, and hate too often. We've learned to make a living, but not a life. We've added years to life, but not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet a neighbor. We've conquered outer space, but not inner space. We've done larger things, but not better things. These are the times of fast foods and slow digestion, big men and small character, steep profits and shallow relationships, two incomes, but more divorce, fancier houses but broken homes, more entertainment and less happiness. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. So we really need some knowledge. What's missing? Where do you think we went wrong? And what are we doing in our education to correct this? We are talking of something in the West 30 years ago. And we are plunging headlong in the same direction. They have woken up and said something is radically wrong, we need to do something different. We also know deep down we need to. But what do we do? Because we are on a treadmill that's taking us in this direction and we can't get off. So maybe we should listen to what Andrew Cohen says. He says, look, maybe there is something we are missing which the great wisdom tradition in India had. So I've said all this to show you that maybe there is room to listen to what the wise sages had to say. I'm not one of those who says that all this is bad and then we should go back to the old ways. First of all, it can't happen. It's foolish to think that way. But we need to integrate that which is actually flowing through our veins, in our genes, and to see how we can really correct our course and live a more integral life. So that's a simple objective of this. And there's a writer called I.K. Taimni, who belongs to the Theosophical Society, who wrote a book called Self-Culture in the Light of Ancient Wisdom. And I just want to quote something which really hits the nail on the head. It says this: undiscriminating attitude with regard to the acquisition of knowledge. He says, most of the knowledge we acquire in schools and colleges, including the IITs, is of such a nature that we are never required to use it in later life. True?
Yes.
Resounding yes. While all that knowledge which is of vital importance in living our life properly does not come into the picture at all. True? So let's try to see if we can fit in that. So what we need is something integral where we don't lose the core, and if it touches our hearts and minds, maybe some of us will go deeper into that, and that itself will transform our life. In India, the wise rishis had their fundas clear about the ultimate objective of human existence itself. They use a very simple word. They said it's self-realization. Okay, whatever that means, we'll try to figure out what they try to mean. But basically, you need to address every little thing you do, including sitting here in this hall, to some higher objective. But we don't do that. We live lives discreetly. We are sitting here for some time, then we appreciate this talk, and then we go back, and then we get back on the treadmill. So there's a lack of integrity in things that we do. But if we really had a vision, and we could really feel it in our hearts, so here self-realization is not theory. It's not knowledge that you store somewhere and you don't apply in your day-to-day life. It's something that has to flow out in every little action 24/7. So the fundamental question that I think all of us need to address at some point or the other are very basic. Who am I? Why am I here? And how is my life purpose connected to the rest of the world? I'm not trying to attempt to answer these questions, but I think we need to explore these questions. And actually, the very curiosity to explore is the first thing that we need, and it has been intense curiosity. You'll find that traditionally we don't do it. We don't do it in our colleges because we are now following a Western model of education. And unfortunately, in today's education, you can't talk about certain things that, we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bath water. The traditional wisdom was very unequivocal on this. Okay, so they were not just not shy, they started with it. And it's this: everything came from something mysterious, which is a supreme intelligence, which is of the nature of spirit, which is the nature of pure consciousness, which was there before the Big Bang, is sustaining the world and so many universes, and is something to which everything will return to again. Okay, you can take it or leave it, but that's ancient wisdom. So this split that today we have between matter and spirit did not exist. Okay, so the topic that I'm going to talk on is Prakriti, which actually belongs to the world of matter and its subtler forms, and the subtlest form is spirit. And in the tradition, for example, in the Sankhya yoga system, they referred to another term for that. They called it the Purusha. Now, the apparent disparity or discord between Purusha and Prakriti is only apparent, and it arises because of something called ignorance. Because for some reason, spirit chose to manifest in all the way down to matter, and in matter it's really in deep ignorance. And it's an evolutionary journey to rediscover the light and maybe bring it down all the way to matter. So that ignorance was called Maya, literally that which is not there, that which is not there. So Prakriti, the word itself comes from two roots, pra and kri. Pra means before and kri means to create. This is the root of create, also comes from kri. So Prakriti is actually a potential for creation, before creation. So it's actually eternal and before time, before the Big Bang, along with its component Purusha. Now, Purusha and Prakriti have also been given male and female meanings, but Purusha is something hidden, and it's the male which plants a seed that sprouts its potential, and it's Prakriti which really operates in the world, and Purusha is hidden and we are not aware of it. That's the tradition. I'll talk about a Sufi poem which I like a lot, which says, "Spirit sleeps in the mineral, in matter. It dreams in the plant, stirs in the animal, and awakens in man." Beautiful Sufi wisdom, which is completely aligned with the ancient Indian tradition. So, matter sleeps. Look at this, sleeping, doesn't move. It likes to sleep. This body likes to sleep. It doesn't want to get up and move, and that's actually half the problem. We say the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? So, the very nature of sleeping, of staying put, of maintaining status quo, of inertia, and yet having stability, of complete ignorance, inconscious, is the first guna that we will look at. It's the tamo guna, it's tamas, which also means darkness. It's predominant, and it's predominant in the sense that that's where we identify. See, the gunas are a fantastic way of describing Prakriti, describing everything that you can see, both physically, psychologically, intellectually, everything you can see as the workings of these gunas. In much the same way as you see color, any color can be split up into three primary colors. We've learned that in physics. What's it? Red, green and blue. Any color is a mixture of these. Similarly, anything is a mixture of the three gunas. And one of them is tamas. It is strongest in matter, in the physical body for the human nature. And its primary interest, the tamasic person's primary interest is just to survive. Okay? Physical survival. So the qualities that are associated with tamas are immobility, sluggish or mechanical action. That action has to be motivated by another guna. By itself it will stay put. Dullness, fatigue, darkness, delusion, heaviness, sloth, lethargy, lack of energy, lack of empathy, depression, prone to intoxication, and it can even get into fanaticism when you have tamas conjoining with mindless violence, conjoining with the next level, which is rajas. Spirit sleeps in matter. That's the first part. Spirit dreams in the plant and stirs in the animal. So a little movement. And that is the force of creation. That comes from movement, from kinesis, and that is rajas. Okay, related to Raja, which means that's what the king does. You have to do things to govern, to move things in the world. So it's about kinesis, passion and action, and it represents a life force. That's where the plant comes in. It represents vitality in the body and in the lower mind. It represents impulses, not so much the nervous sensations which you can put into tamas. It represents a vital ego. And here you're not so much worried about the survival of the physical body. You want to be rich and famous. You have an image of yourself. So it's a survival of that image which we can call the ego self. A sense of uniqueness that you have. It represents passion, struggle. There's a lot of effort, because when you awaken and you find yourself in this inert body, it's a huge struggle to even get up in the morning, right? Because something says go back to sleep. The tamas pulls you back. And then it takes a while to throw off the covers and jump out of the bed. What makes you do that? That's rajas, if you can do it. Many people can't do it, so they take a long while to wake up. But once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep. Okay, then, and that's where we all are, then you're hyperactive and you really don't know what to do, because you need something else to tell you what to do, and that's where intelligence comes in. So it's passion, struggle, it represents a kinetic motor power, it represents yearning, desire-driven action, greed, busyness, hyperactivity, impatience, resulting in its flip side, stress, which we are all familiar with, anxiety, worrying, restlessness, boredom, a tendency to be consumerist, and prone to mindless entertainment to overcome this boredom, because your mind is always active, even if your body is not, and you can't even go to sleep. And then you yearn for tamas actually. Tamas is a break that you apply in your life. It's one way to take rest, but there's a higher way. That's where you can use the third guna. So what's the third guna? Spirit awakens in man. So what makes man different? Man is able to be self-aware. It's able to talk about these things. It's able to find meaning and direction in life. It's able to make conscious choices. It's able to think clearly. And the clarity in thinking in its supreme sense is light. And so tamas is, sattva is actually, it comes from sat, which means beingness. It actually represents lucidity, okay, clarity in thinking, harmony in life, equilibrium. It comes from knowledge. Your knowledge community should be really basking in sattva, but we'll shortly see that you may be basking in other things, rajas and tamas, and that's a great awakening to say that's our birthright, that's where we need to go, we need to bring down that light all the way into matter. So it represents the higher mind, the intellect, the buddhi, the rational will. But here also, if you see the Bhagavad Gita, it says that it also belongs to the lower prakriti. It also needs to be transcended. It's also something that you are bound by. And that's interesting, because we said that you have the attachment to the physical survival at the tamasic level. You have the attachment to the notion of your uniqueness, the ego self at the rajasic level. What do you think the attachment is at the sattvic level? Even the wise people tend to get attached. To what? What do you get attached to, knowledge workers?
You attached to get promotions.
No, promotions and all is ego. Those are all lower level things. We are talking of higher stuff, yeah. Now you see knowledge workers, the primary, you are not mental beings, you're vital beings. You say, I want this, I want promotion, I want patent, and I want people to recognize me, my worth. That's all that's all rajasic ego. So
Not
what
even-
is the sattvic?
Not even sattva guna.
No, so there is something which is superior attachment. This is an inferior attachment. Even if you overcome this, even if you transcended this, you are still attached to something. What are you attached to?
No.
What are all the great professors attached to?
Knowledge.
Yes. See, finally you say, it's my knowledge. Even the fact that you feel you're more spiritual is an attachment. The fact that you judge others being inferior to you. So that's the price. So there is a bond. And the guna really means a rope, a strand which ties you down. And so really, if you want to find self-realization, you need to actually break through all, purify all, and reach a state or discover a state which is beyond the gunas. Nirguna. And yet live in the real world, so-called real world, which when you discover nirguna and your deeper identity, you will see that this so-called real world is not so real, and the reality is deep down here, the ultimate truth. But you bring down that superior consciousness, that spirit in you into manifesting in the world, and that's a huge shift from getting unconsciously tied and immersed in the workings of lower prakriti to something much richer and higher. And that is, you discover your purusha, which is veiled, covered, and with that recognition, when you re-enter the world of prakriti, you actually do something completely different. And that's called higher prakriti. Then you manifest something called shakti in the traditional Indian tradition. So straight away, I want to show the way out. The way out is you must have the ability to step back and see what's going on. And you'll find that things you can immediately see, look, this is tamas which is operating. It's not just operating in me, it's operating elsewhere, and it's operating on its own. It has its own laws, and I'm helplessly caught up in it. I can see rajas operating. I can see sattva operating. So, in summary, tamas is felt as something heavy, dull, clouding everything. For example, delusion. Delusion is something intellectual, but it's come because this ignorance has covered you up, and when you talk of promotion, that's all delusion. Okay? Whereas rajas is characterized by something stimulating and moving, which you need. If you're remaining sattvic all the time, nothing gets done.
I got one question. So this person is Sudhir Vanapalli from Hyderabad. He is asking,
Please.
how to move from Rajas Guna to Sattva in today's world?
Today's world. A, relax. Okay, just relax. You see, the very need to move from rajas to something is reflecting a restlessness, a movement. You understand? You can't do it. So there's a story about a Zen story where someone was afraid of his own shadow. He said, the shadow is chasing me, and he ran all the way to meet a guru, and he found that the shadow was following all the time. And he reached the guru and told him, look, how do I, this thing is chasing me all the time, and it's a dark shadow. I want to get rid of it. How do I move from rajas to sattva? Guru gave him a simple advice. He said, just sit down. Someone once said that half the problems in the world would not happen if only people knew how to just sit down quietly for a while in their rooms. And that sitting down is actually meant to be meditation. Okay? You must learn to calm your body, calm your mind. We offer 2 courses in IIT. We offer a course on self-awareness, where our students, someday I can talk about that, they really learn techniques to relax. Because only when you calm down, you can see the madness that you live in. Okay? We are all living crazy lives without knowing we are crazy. The Buddha said it's like you have a beaker of turbid water, and the more questions you ask, the more turbid it becomes, and you're not really solving anything. So if you want clarity, you have to let that turbidity subside. You must learn to discover inner peace, inner stillness. And then not only you get peace and rest from restlessness, but you also can draw down light. You can draw down illumination. So it's a deep question, with no offense said to you, but stay with that question. And the problem is, you ask the question and then you move on with your life. You won't find sattva easily. Okay, so sattva is buoyant and shining. You feel like you're floating, and more than that, you feel that you are really not doing things. There's a great flow that does things on its own. So there's a freedom from all this promotion and all that, which is ridiculous. See, this whole concept of doership and ownership, intellectual property, is delusion. Okay, it's tamas coming into to your understanding of reality. You will see the motive force is prakriti. It is not your prakriti. There's just one motive force. And it's foolish to say it's I did it. That's classic rajasic and tamasic understanding of. That's why in the Gita it says, the notion of doership is the most ridiculous notion that you can have. But that seems to be the incentive to do work, right? And what do we do about it? If you look at all the great wisdom traditions, look at the Upanishads. Did anyone claim any authorship? Did anyone publish and put a name and patent it? They must have been fools, no? Okay. Now, who's foolish and who's not will be discovered when you really go inside and you see that, look, the world is operating beautifully on its own. The sun is shining and setting, and even this restlessness is happening on its own. The heart is beating on its own. What can I do? Why does the heart beat? What's the purpose of my life? And when you ask these deep questions, you'll find that you can get the answers, convincing answers, only if you can connect to your source. And your source is not different from my source. It's one common source. And you see, you have a unified vision. And if you want to still take part in the world, you would choose to take part so that you align yourself with a much larger goal, with a much higher goal. To use a very conventional phrase, you look forward to being an instrument of the divine. So it's not your promotion. So all these ideas come because we see imperfection, we identify with deficiency, and we think that if we fill ourselves with these deficiencies, at the end of the day, someday we will find fulfillment. But it's a black hole. You'll never find it. But if you could go inside and taste that perfection which is already there in you, and it's a different ball game altogether. You're already happy, you're already fulfilled, and from that fulfillment you operate. So that's the nature of sattvic. And you have a question? You can stop me whenever I run short of time.
Sure.
Okay.
See, we live in real world. When
The
we-
sages lived in an unreal world, yes.
when we say that we have to detach ourselves from this real world and then think of a self-actualization or self-realization. Of course, everybody has to do it, and if you say that there is a purpose, you will find out the purpose. Maybe everybody realized that, or unconsciously they know the purpose is to be realistic.
Be?
Realistic. Get the tension.
I have
Think about the
I have a
promotion.
simple
Think about.
simple question. to you. Are you happy, fulfilled with the way you're living life? Simple question, you answer that, don't worry about other people. You. Do you feel there is something missing? That the so-called real world you talk about is not really giving you the fulfillment that you really need?
Yes.
Okay,
The question
that's
is.
it.
The
Now,
question is. Are you happy?
interested? Are you interested in finding a better way? Would you like to see what other people have to say? Would you like to experiment? Would you like to explore? Do you know
Of
that?
course.
Do you know that a scripture like the Bhagavad Gita was meant precisely for people like you? Okay, it shows the way, for example, of how to find inner peace and stillness deep within you, and still act in the real world, still do what is needed to be done. So there is a way. But if you stay with a certain level of tamasic and rajasic consciousness, and you want solutions in those levels where the problems are already there, it's not possible. So you have to find another way. And you have to begin with the possibility that there is another way. And you have to show a little faith in the fact that all these wise sages from whom we have descended, they may not be really the idiots we may think them to be. And they are talking of things that can be realized. And texts like the Gita are meant for ordinary beings like you and me, not for extraordinary beings. But we grossly underestimate our abilities. And that's the problem. You know, we are like caterpillars whose only aim in life is to get promotion and become fatter and fatter caterpillars, without knowing that our real destiny is undergoing a metamorphosis, a transformation. And once the caterpillar becomes a butterfly and becomes free, this question will not haunt you anymore, because you look back and say, oh, it's so obvious. But you ask any caterpillar and you say, look, the butterfly is there, you're going to be that. He said, that's unreal. This is the real world, the world of the caterpillar. Okay, we'll move on. Can I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay, fine.
Okay. What I feel is, even though we reach that sattvic level, how far it is possible in this real world, being in a family, working in companies, to, like say, be in that level. Once we reach that, how far it is possible to retain in that level? Because I feel, fine, we can reach that level at some point, we can find inner peace. But there will be people around you, like say, part of your friends, your family, your colleagues, who would try to bring you down.
You're right, you're right. Look, yeah, sure. By the way, that's Mr. Singhal, the Vice President of the Theosophical Society, International. Okay.
I think
first of all, we have to answer three questions honestly. First is, do we relate ourselves with others, or are we selfish? Think we are totally separate. Second question is, are we at peace with ourselves? And this will not happen till we say, be content with what you have, or what is. And the third question is, are we becoming better and better human beings day by day? Keeping in mind the definition of a human being, he is one who feels the pain of others, not just be happy with everything.
Sure. Thank you.
Once we are answered these fundamental questions,
Yeah.
I think then we know where we stand, and then we can find a way.
Thank you, Mr. Singhal. The answer is simple. Your questions are very valid and they're actual genuine fears which everybody faces. But you should realize that you're like somebody living a one-dimensional world and seeing, can it really exist, the 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions? There's no way. It's, you're like a frog in a well. You have to explore. And you must have the courage to explore. It's like the story of the guy who had a little torch and the guru told him, look, you got to travel 10 kilometers and reach that destination. He said, look, but this torch is only having this much distance. I can't see anything more than 2 feet. He says, don't worry, walk along, explore. Because from your current perspective, which is no great shakes by the way, that's all you can see. So there is the path of jnana. And there is another path, an alternative path, which especially in the religious people understand, the path of bhakti. And there's one line. Let me also suggest, before time runs out, the advice given by Krishna to Arjuna. Now whether you listen to it or respect it or not, I don't know, but I think many in the audience would be willing to accept it. He says, walk this path. Okay? Take my word for it, just walk this path. And then, yoga kshemam vahami aham. Yoga means the ultimate goal of union between the individual and the divine, the ultimate self-realization. Kshemam is precisely this, material well-being, prosperity. Both yoga and kshema, which are your real objectives, which is both the spiritual, the paramarthik and the material, including your family relationships, the vyavharik, is my responsibility. Don't worry. Walk, man. Walk and then discover. And so there's only one way to learn swimming. You have to jump into the water. Okay? Say, what happens if I jump into the water? It might be so cold, I might never come up, I might drown there, there'll be other people, my family members will pull me down or pull me back. Yes, all that can happen. But you got no choice, man. If you really want to break through, if you want to find the escape velocity from this gravitational field that's holding us all down in the world of tamas, rajas and even sattva, you have to find the escape velocity. And many people have done it. You must have some faith. You must have some humility. Do we have time or we've run short?
We have lost 5 minutes.
And we have got a question from Ramya Mahendran. I think she's from Ambattur, I think she's asking. Does one need trust in divine and self to walk this path?
Well, it's like this. Nature has gifted us 4 engines. Okay? In the traditional Indian wisdom, they are the 4 paths of yoga. Bhakti yoga is one path, and it's one of the engines. Karma yoga, with the attitude of doing nishkamya karma, is another engine. You can do that. The third is jnana yoga, which is the real, right royal, the light of knowledge manifesting in you. That's your third engine. And the 4th engine is the path of meditative practice, Raja Yoga. It's all there in the Gita. At least use one engine. Whichever is your choice. But what I would recommend is you explore all that. And there have been great masters, for example, the integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo. He recommends at least 3 engines to be used, and I would recommend that. In fact, Karma Yoga is not an independent engine. You use whatever light and wisdom that you have and bring in whatever love and devotion you can to consecrate everything you do in life, and the outcome of that, you bring light and love, and karma flows through that. It completely changes the way you do simple things. You know, brushing your teeth. So we have this concept in India of yajna. Okay, so everything is given as an offering. And when you do that, you give your best. Okay, so there's no place for tamas in that. So the great pillars of the Indian tradition are, first, Shraddha. Shraddha means you must, it's not simple faith. You have a kind of absolute dedication, unshakable dedication to go this way. You must have Jyoti, which is the purified form of Sattva. You must do Yajna, which is give, sacrifice, okay, offer, instead of always take. You must do Tapa. Tapa is all this rajas, which is really which is both good and which is, really an obstacle. Don't let it get dissipated in 200 mundane activities which doesn't give you the energy to really follow what you need to do. So conserve that fire. Keep it. It's like doing penance. Till using wisdom, you apply it in the direction that it needs to be applied. That's where you are good at. That's your natural talent. That's your life purpose. You will choose a vocation that suits you. And everything you do should be an outcome of that. And dana, which is what you give to the world out. That's your offering to the world. And for what purpose? For loka sangraha, for the well-being of the universe. So, choose your engine, but right now none of those engines are operational. We are sitting there and saying, will it work? Where's the guarantee? It's a good question, but there's only one way of knowing it.
You always go with the outputs.
So do we have time or we'll stop with this?
Last 2 minutes.
Okay, last 2 minutes. I think, yeah. I just want to talk about, we are all knowledge workers coming in, working in organizations. See, what really motivates us? Usually it's the carrot and stick approach, right? The stick, which means I'll throw you out of the company if you don't deliver, multiply my profits tenfold, write so many programs or subroutines or apps or whatever these knowledge workers are doing. That's a stick. Which guna represents a stick? Tamas, yes, because the fellow doesn't want to do anything, but he's beaten if he doesn't do anything. That's how the slaves created the pyramids and all that, right? Tamas. But the carrot is the promotion that you get, right? Which guna does that represent? That's rajas, right? Now there are some people whom the bosses cannot drive with the carrot or stick. They are the authentic guys who don't need those incentives and who are not influenced so easily by them. What do they want? Well, they want to find fulfillment in their lives. Okay, these little temptations don't work, and they don't want to do things that they don't feel are authentic, that are not meaningful. That's the true knowledge community. They will do what they believe is right, and they'll do it anyway, whether you give them a job or you don't give them a job. And that, when it's given as an offering, as a consecration to the world, that is an ideal way to live. Don't you agree? Would you not aspire for that? So I will end by suggesting that I've just given some glimpses to something which to my mind is more precious than all the other knowledge that we normally have. It's difficult to teach this. It's difficult to formally do this, because you can lead only to the extent the other person is willing to move and explore.
So
happy exploration.
So last question,
Yep.
I think. Sattva does not give any scope for ego, selfishness, but in the corporate world it's more about my and our culture. So how to survive in this world with Sattva qualities?
Right, I don't agree with that. You see, once you are an instrument of the divine, you will bring light wherever you grow. So when there is an inner transformation, the whole company transforms. So one individual, one Mahatma Gandhi could change people around him. So we've grossly underestimated ourselves. We are all living in ignorance. the boss, the company who is forcing you to do this is doing this because it does not know anything better. You show them a way and they will follow. And people who have authentically realized their power is phenomenal. And so I think that power is hidden in all of us. So if you believe that you are limited, you're finite, you can't do this, you can't do, then you're not being true to yourself, and I think you're not being true to the purpose for which you were born. So there is a way. You have to find the way. It's not immediately obvious. But as you awaken, as you grow, as you discover and you get support, yoga kshemam vahamyaham, things will unfold on their own. Okay?
Hello.
So,
Just half a minute. Various questions have a common thing.
so,
There's this anecdote which I will narrate.
Sure. We are biting into our next speaker's time.
I think one more speaker.
A group of people went to Krishnamurti,
Jiddu Krishnamurti.
Yadu
Yeah.
Krishnamurti, saying that it is very difficult to survive in this world. He said, don't survive.
So, I think you want to ask Professor directly, I will give the mobile phone.
Technology, yes. Hello? Yeah, go ahead, ask your question quickly. Hello? Yeah. Oh, she just wants to chat with you.
No.
Okay.
She mentioned that she wants to ask.
No problem. I think she got intimidated because he said, don't survive.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor. It's really an interesting and eye-opener for me personally in many things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I request Virupakshan to share this memento to the Professor.
Thank you very much.